sallallahu ala sayyidina wa maulana Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وأزواجه وذريته.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، له الملك وله الحمد، يحيي ويميت بيده الخير وهو على كل شيء قدير. وأشهد أن سيدنا ونبينا وقائدنا وإمامنا محمدا عبد الله ورسوله، أرسله الله تعالى رحمة للعالمين على فترة من الرسل وقلة من العلم، فأدى الأمانة وبلغ الرسالة ونصح الأمة، فجزاه الله خير ما جزى نبيا عن أمته. أوصيكم يا عباد الله وإياي بتقوى الله، وتزودوا فإن خير الزاد التقوى، واتقون يا أولي الألباب. My dear most respected brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today we continue with the second part of our series on the signs of love for the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. In our previous program, we mentioned three of the signs which illustrate or which demonstrate true love for the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Firstly, to emulate the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, to apply his sunnah, to follow his words, his deeds, his actions, to obey his commands and to avoid his prohibitions. For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us of the way of manifesting our love for him through following the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam in this amazing ayah, قُلْ إِن كُنْتُمْ تُحِبُّونَ اللَّهَ فَاتَّبِعُونِي يُحْبِبُكُمُ اللَّهُ وَيَغْفِرْ لَكُمْ ذُنُوبَكُمْ وَاللَّهُ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. Secondly, to prefer what the Holy Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam enjoined upon us, to have that preference to what he commands us to do, or what he says, or what he has done by his actions, or what he consented to, over our own preferences. And this is yet another important sign of true love for the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us the example of the Muhajirin and the Ansar, those who performed hijrah from Mecca to Medina, and the Ansar in Medina who helped the migrants who emigrated from Mecca to Medina. Thirdly, to have anger or to display anger only for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and not because of our own nafs or ego, or because of for some worldly benefit. And so the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, in the hadith that's narrated by Sayyidina Anas ibn Malik and reported by Imam at-Tirmidhi, the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam told Anas, "My son, if you can be without any grudge in your heart against anyone in the morning and in the evening, then be like that." And then he added, "My son, that is part of my sunnah. Whoever gives life to my sunnah has loved me, and whoever loves me is with me in the garden of paradise." And so in this hadith now, the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam first of all tells us of this important sign of love for him, that we should free our hearts from hatred and malice and grudge against anyone, and If we can do so in the morning, then we do that. If we can do so in the evening, then we do that. In other words, evaluate ourselves in the morning. Evaluate ourselves in the evening. And if we find any grudges in our heart against anyone, then we strive to remove that. And then the Prophet ﷺ added, this is part of my sunnah. And so included in the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, it's our internal spiritual state, our haqiqah, our internal reality. Sunnah is not restricted only to outward forms or outward manifestations. And we need to be very mindful about this this all-inclusive definition of the sunnah that the Prophet ﷺ mentions in this hadith to Anas. My son, this is part of my sunnah. And the Prophet ﷺ addressed Anas as his son, even though Anas is not his son, because of that amazing relationship between them. Anas, since a young teenager, had given himself over to the service of the Prophet ﷺ, to take care of the Prophet ﷺ, and he said, I served the Prophet for 10 years. This is in another hadith. خَدِمْتُ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهِ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ عَشْرَ سِنِينَ. I served the Prophet for 10 years, and he never ever once told me, Anas, why you did this if I did something that he didn't like, or why I didn't do this if I didn't do something that he had asked me to do. He never told me anything like that. No hurtful words, no words of displeasure for 10 years. And Anas is taking care of the Prophet ﷺ, serving him, doing the things, the errands that he wanted him to do, and so on and so forth. And Anas gained tremendously from the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ made a special dua for Anas. And later on, Anas mentioned this dua, and there are 4 things that the Prophet ﷺ made dua for Anas. And Anas said that he saw these things, and at the time when he related this hadith, he said he saw 3 of them, and then the other one was about the hereafter, and he said he wished that he would receive this in the hereafter. Inshallah, in another episode, we would talk about this special dua that the Prophet ﷺ made for Anas, and about the dua of the Prophet ﷺ in general, the amazing power or an effect of the dua of the Prophet ﷺ. So to show anger against anyone only for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is very important. The next point, the 4th point I want to mention with respect to the signs of love of the Prophet ﷺ, is to mention the Holy Prophet often, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Because whoever loves something, mention it a lot. Think about the things that you love in your own life, and think about how often you would mention that thing. Or think about someone, a person that you love tremendously in your life, and think about how often you would mention them.